So I said I would make a video for parents, and that's exactly what I'm doing. Although some of this is also really useful for students too. Maybe you just want to share it with your parents subtly somehow. But it's about what we do, how we can support our children through particularly difficult A levels, and really just actually any difficult subject that they're having in school, where there becomes this friction between you, the parent, wanting to support your child and do the best for them, the child themselves who may have some anxiety about this particularly challenging subject. And obviously, I come across this a lot because I'm a chemistry teacher and tutor, and also looking at the relationships with the school and with the teacher, and really focusing on what we can do. A levels are a very big step up from GCSEs. Many students get a little bit caught off guard along with their parents, and is quite a shock to the system. And there were subjects that was manageable at GCSE, and they become a lot more demanding. And it's not uncommon, especially if the student was very bright and capable at GCSE, for them to struggle at A level. And for parents, that then becomes very difficult because you want to know how best to help. And it's very easy to slip into frustration, either with your child or with their teachers in school or with both of them. So obviously questions that I get asked sometimes, or I get told about, especially as a tutor, is the whole, I have a really bad teacher. Okay, so there's a lot of phrases around, oh, my chemistry teacher is terrible, my physics teacher is really bad, or I hear it from parents too. So they will say things like, I can't help them because, I had a really bad teacher during my GCSEs. I didn't get on with science. So first of all, I want to rephrase this, and everybody needs to rephrase this right now. There's not many bad teachers, by which I don't mean that there aren't ineffective teachers. What I mean is I don't think there's many teachers that are drowning puppies, or I don't know, fiddling their tax returns, or anything actually intrinsically very bad. They may be just different. Okay. And what might happen instead is that you have a bad relationship with the teacher. And that happens for many different reasons. So there might be a sort of established relationship from earlier in school. That can often happen because, teenagers be teenagers. Sometimes you behaved differently as a student at different years in your life, and even in different classes. I've seen that 100 times, right? Even with different teachers. And so sometimes everybody's got their preconceived ideas. You might remember a teacher from in the past where they were less effective at behavior management, and that lowers your opinion of them at A level. And they may be looking at a student thinking about how they were 3 years ago, and that can colour their perceptions. We all have biases. We can't sort of escape it. It's a natural human thing. Some teachers you just don't vibe with them. I'm not even sure if, as a 44-year-old, if I'm allowed to use the word vibe in that context, but it's true, right? We're all different. We have different philosophies, different mannerisms, different senses of humor, different expectations of behavior, different expectations, different things we care about and values, different politics. There's so many different things, okay, where you just don't get on with a teacher. But and it could also be that teachers are less effective because of just how much they're dealing with, and we will definitely get onto that. So this video is not the focus on, any kind of blaming either of students, parents, or teachers. It's a recognition that there's going to be people that we don't get on with in every walk of life. Let's focus on how we can make this situation better. How we can mend relationships. I do not want to take sides ever in any kind of pointless war, because nobody wins, especially not students. So I'm going to look at managing expectations, what's reasonable and what maybe is coming from a place of emotion, and just get away from this horrible online trend of everybody fighting everybody else and taking sides about things. Because if you or your child are taking A levels, they are important, and it doesn't help anyone if we just want to point fingers and place blame about why they're not doing as well as we hope. So, point number 1, parents and teachers are on the same side. There are no teachers anywhere that are like, oh, I really wish my students would fail. What? Why would we do that? Why would we want to make ourselves look bad? That doesn't happen. So it's really rare that teachers don't work hard, and it's really rare that teachers want their students to do badly. It's not impossible, but it's super, super rare. So generally, parents and teachers are on the same side. The main common issues is that the teacher wants the child to succeed, but they're working with so many students. And obviously, as a parent, you maybe only have 1 or 2 or a few more, but you certainly don't have 100 children. Okay. And so you're balancing very different needs and very different perspectives. So it doesn't help anyone to be confrontational, and it doesn't really benefit the student. Teachers are super individual people. Okay, they're human beings. They come in all different shapes and sizes. And again, there will be things that don't match about you. That should not hamper a professional relationship, and it shouldn't hamper a teaching relationship. So if your child is saying, this teacher doesn't like me, that might actually be true. Think about it. Like, if you're seeing a certain number of people or dealing with a certain number of people, if you've got any kind of job where you're facing people, you will realize you don't like all of them all the time. That's impossible. You can't just get on with everybody all the time. But it should not hamper how that teacher works. The teacher should not be sort of outwardly showing that they don't like a student. And generally what's happening there is a little bit of paranoia. And remember, as a parent, that you are generally seeing one side of the situation when you get the feedback from your child about what's happening at school. So I'm not calling your child a liar. I'm saying that everything that we see, perceive, is like through our filter of our own emotions of how we feel about ourselves. Teachers also have those emotions. They're human beings. They have lives. They have families. They have health concerns. They're not superheroes. They're not magic. They get stuck in traffic. Their cars break down. Their technology breaks down. Their marriages break down. So have realistic expectations on your teacher being a human being. Have realistic expectations for communication. This is something that I think snowballed with COVID, particularly in lockdown and everybody sort of going online. There seems to be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to not receiving replies to things. So first of all, think about how you communicate. So are you going to directly, if you have a concern, are you going to directly email that teacher? If you phone the school, it's pretty inefficient and doesn't generally get through. When are you expecting the teacher to answer that phone call? Because they're probably in lessons most of the working day. So generally, I would say an email contact is always the best form of contact, and to email the individual teacher. Because it's not uncommon also for teachers to go 6 hours without having time to respond to email, by which time you're then expecting them to possibly respond to it later in the evening, that kind of thing. So if you've sent an email at sort of 10 o'clock at night when you've got wound up about something, that teacher has probably got into school about pre 8 o'clock in the morning, but that doesn't mean that they go in and they sit down and they start looking through emails, because the reason they're in school at that early is because they're running a class before, group-based, tutor group, whatever. They're photocopying. They might be supervising a freezing cold brick playground or standing on a bus queue. They might then have a lunchtime duty or a lunchtime club that they're running. And also, they do have to eat. They have to go to the toilet. So have some realistic expectations about when they're going to reply. So when you're sending that email, because of that idea that these teachers are probably getting hundreds of emails and you want to be specific about what you actually want. Don't just send a rant, because how does that help anybody? If you want worried about progress, can you ask for something specific? So what is it that you want to know? Do you want to know how they did on a test? I feel like if they're doing A-levels, they should be telling you that. You could be asking, if you know they didn't do so well on something, you could be asking for a specific resource to support them. Ask if the student needs to be doing more outside of class. So basically, there's not really much to be gained if you're just going to send an email that says, why did they do so badly on that test? What's going wrong? They were much better than this at GCSE. Why are they getting a D now? They were getting a B before. Your teaching methods aren't working. My child doesn't understand you. These are all just assumptions, statements. They're not action. They don't result in anything changing, except a lot of people feeling confrontational and defensive. And then you've not got off to a good relationship. So the next thing, this is probably this is difficult. I'm going to say it because working in a school is hard. So think about if what you're asking for your child, who is, hopefully the light of your life, just most of the time, that you love deeply and care about and want to succeed. True, you are coming from all of those perspectives, and also your teacher does want your child to succeed too. Is what you're asking reasonable compared to the number of students that one teacher has in a class and that one teacher is dealing with per week in a secondary school or sixth form environment? So let me break that down for you. A typical teacher is probably 24 hours of lessons a week, plus meetings, plus duties, plus clubs, plus after school sessions, plus marking, plus communicating with parents. They may see around 100 to 200 different students, which could be, say, 100 sets of parents. So if you've sent 5 emails this week, imagine that teacher has now received 500. Is that reasonable? Here are some things that I think 100% are reasonable. So I'm just totally going to get on the parent side here of what I've seen some very bad practices from schools. I've worked in a lot of schools and also have dealt obviously with tutees and students that I've worked with, and they have dealt with some schools who are struggling and therefore the teachers are working in bad systems. So what you should expect, especially for A-level, the students should know what they're doing in a term. Like they should have a plan of what topics, if they've got more than one teacher, what each teacher is going to cover. They should know when they're having tests, within a week or two's notice. They should know what is on that test. Obviously not what the questions, but what topics are being covered. They should know where to find materials. So if there are PowerPoints, if there's anything like that, where is it accessible? All that kind of thing. So sometimes the student has been told all this, right? And it's just, they've lost focus and they don't know. So sometimes you can get a lot of information from school websites and from department websites for that school. And there's possibly a lot on some kind of portal or on Teams or on Google Classroom or something. So check that through before you go on a big rampage, because actually it might just be that students missed something, okay? There's a lot of information overload. We're all getting loads and loads of emails all the time and loads of messages. So check that first, but I think every student should have that as an absolute given. They should know what they're studying. The teacher should know the progress of the student, right? So there should be some sort of system where the records are being kept, records of student attendance and progress. How are they doing? That kind of thing. And learning needs, obviously, that is a sensible recommendation. Okay, so it is reasonable for you to expect if your child has exam access arrangements that your teacher knows about them, that your teacher knows the normal way of working, whether that's using a laptop, if they have dyslexia or dyscalculia or ADHD, any of those particular situations, the teacher should be informed of that and should know how to adjust their teaching and what the recommendations are within reason, because it's not always possible to make every single accommodation, but they should definitely know. Again, I'm just going to add a caveat. It's the beginning of term. Give it like a couple of weeks, because most teachers only get this information in the first week when they're getting all of the other information, including just learning all of these like 100 to 200 names. So please don't go off on one if your teacher does not know your child in that first 2 days of term, right? They might not have met them yet. So records, just generally paperwork, like they should know what they're doing, where they're going, when they're going to be assessed, how they're going to be assessed, and there should be some records of that. And the students should be therefore given the feedback as well. So notice I have not said anything about marking, written marking as a 100% reasonable expectation. So tests should be marked. If I'm trying to get a formal assessment of how a student's doing, it should be done under some sort of test conditions, and it should be marked properly by the teacher. But there is no real reason at sixth form, in my personal opinion, for every single piece of homework to be taken in and ticked and crossed. What needs to happen is students do need to know whether they got something right, whether they got something wrong, how they need to improve, and what topics they're struggling with most. So those are what I would say reasonable expectations. So if that's not happening, that is a reasonable request that you should be making to the teacher. Now let's just have a little few thoughts about what is unreasonable. What is maybe making you that parent that people are dreading? And I hate to say it, because it always comes from a place of love for your child. It does not come from a place, I don't think, of being deliberately difficult. So the benchmark would be, ask yourself, if I'm asking something of my child's teacher or school, how long will this request take? Would it be reasonable to ask this teacher to repeat this for 30 pupils, like every single student in the class, or 50, or 100, like the number of students they might see in a day will be more than 100 for many teachers. So I'm going to give you just a few, just let that sink in. Like, if what you're asking is, I'm only just going to send an email and it's only going to take them 10 minutes to go and find that information and reply to me. Yeah, okay, but now times that by 100. Is that reasonable? Is it necessary? Or is there a time when the school's going to tell you that information anyway, and they're going to tell you it all at the same time, and that's already going to take hours of that teacher's time, writing reports, writing targets, preparing for parents' evenings? So some examples. I have had a parent ask me to set individual extra work for a whole week for a student who went on holiday during term time. Is that reasonable? No, it's not. They've gone on holiday. I've been asked to leave my lesson, so just leave a class of year 8s, to answer a phone call from a parent because she wanted me to deliver a worksheet, a paper worksheet, to another year 8 student in a different class, because that year 8 student was leaving before the end of the day and couldn't be in my lesson later in the week. I had already shared the worksheet on Google Classroom, so they had a digital copy of the worksheet. This was them asking me to leave a class to hand deliver a piece of paper. Been asked to provide 2 sets of textbooks and 2 sets of revision guides for every single subject for a GCSE student because they kept forgetting to bring the right books to school on the right days. Is that reasonable? It's just not possible, is it, really? I can imagine now that the school had to do that for every single child. And so I think, again, and there are some things which they feel very reasonable. So, your child is anxious, your child needs help, your child does not want to ask for help in front of the class because they're anxious. So you make a request. Maybe they could stay at the end of the lesson, and maybe they could just spend 10, 15 minutes with the teacher at the end of the lesson just to ask questions or get some help. It's a very innocent request and it seems really reasonable. And a lot of teachers would find it very hard to say no to that because we really want children to do well. But now you think about this at an A-level point of view, that's an extra hour per week for one student. And most schools are already putting on revision sessions and workshops and things in lunch times and after school, so which those teachers are running. So an hour a week for one student, that's actually quite a lot that you are asking potentially if they've got a lot of issues. Actually, maybe a better way to turn that around is to develop in your child a possibility, or is there a way for the teacher to ask that child less obtrusively in class, even ask another student, or change the way that they question the class, or change the way that they get students to interact so that it's less stressful and less difficult than just sort of, directly waiting for them to ask questions. So there are lots of ways that a teacher could adapt their teaching style so that everyone benefits, and actually, ways that students can be writing their answers down and the teacher circulating and checking, rather than, always waiting for students to ask questions. Avoid comparing teachers to colleagues, especially if they teach a completely different subject. Oh, I've had that one as well in a parents' evening. Does really well in geography, really badly in chemistry. What are you going to do about it? Like, well, I could change my exam books curricula. I don't know. I can't change what's on the exam. It's a hard subject. I'm not saying geography doesn't have its challenges. I am saying not every student is going to like the same subjects or pay attention as much in the same subjects equally. So, imagine if teachers did that in the way that like a lot of parents do. They're like, oh, they do really well in that other person's lesson and they really get it and they really prefer her teaching style. So imagine if the teacher turned around and said, I wish your child was more like Anna. She doesn't need any exam access requirements. She gets it straight away. You wouldn't like it, right? You'd feel pretty offended. You'd take it personally. You'd get defensive. And that's the kind of thing that's going to happen if you start playing teachers against each other and saying, oh, she's fine in that lesson. So instead, why not try to find out what it is about the other teacher that your child gets on with, what it specifically is, not just, how they dress or the fact that they let them get away with coming late, or I don't know. If it's something about the teacher's lessons that suits your child and is a reasonable request, like just sharing something more with them in advance, like giving them a copy of the PowerPoint and the resources, allowing them to sit closer to the front, getting a checklist for them to work. Like if it's a particular mode of working that teacher has, that is a sort of reasonable thing to ask, then definitely that is something that you could bring up. Instead of saying she prefers this person's lessons, you could say what they like about it is that she does this at the beginning of the lesson. Is there a possibility that you could do that? There you go. Be prepared to not get your way, but it is a far friendlier way to approach something when your child is finding stuff difficult. Okay, enough teacher bashing. Let's move on to what you can do to actually help your child, because your child is getting close to adult age if they're taking A-levels. So some things that you did to help them in the past might not be helping them so much anymore. And so again, I'm trying to put this in a very friendly way and not sort of point any fingers, lay any blame, but sometimes when we're trying to help somebody, we don't help. Okay, we're actually making things harder in the long run. So let's think about some specific ways, especially if your child is studying something that's quite hard and perhaps is something that you're not really familiar with, like maths or sciences, and maybe that's not your specialty. These are some things that actually, yeah, you can help with, that can really make things easier, especially as they get closer to exams, and especially if they're anxious and struggling with a topic. So you can support them with organisation and planning. Okay. If that's something they struggle with, you could support them in a friendly way with, shall we sit down and work out a weekly schedule? Shall we put some time aside and say, this is when you're going to work on chemistry, this is what you're going to do on biology? You can give them ideas. And again, you could work with the teacher with this one, which is a great way of involving the teacher, of what could they be doing. On a Wednesday evening, I've put an hour aside. And rather than sort of making it very confrontational, you can be then saying, reminding them, this is your time, you're going to work on chemistry. Do you know what you're doing? Have you got everything that you need? Alongside that is making sure that they've got a space and an environment that is welcoming for them to do the learning in. Just even as a tutor, sometimes I'm actually sort of quite overwhelmed myself by background noises, and I'm not even in the same room. I'm online and I'm just hearing stuff with a microphone. So does your child have somewhere that they can give themselves some quiet space? And space kind of important as well. So if they struggle with organisation, having somewhere where they can have stuff down and they can come back to it without constantly having to put stuff away and get stuff out. I know it's not always possible, but in that case, maybe having digital space and organising things digitally, that's something you can help with. You can ask them, where is your stuff? Like, where does the school share things? Different schools have different ways of putting things online. Do you know where all this stuff is? I'm going to help you with that. We're going to get it all organised, because sometimes it's all just very overwhelming. And the student's like, I don't even know what we did last year. I don't know where it all is now. You know, bits of paper being on back of a rucksack, and I just don't know anything. So giving them a fresh start is really helpful. You might not understand the subject, but you could do things like doing little quizzing with them to help them prepare for tests if you've got that kind of relationship. I wouldn't force it, because sometimes, again, you don't want to bring up friction if you're asking them questions they don't know the answers, and we don't want to have that dynamic of you bugging them, nagging them, making them feel worse. Showing an interest. So showing an interest is just like, what have you been doing? What have you been doing? Like, because your child talking about it really helps it bring to mind for them. What did you do in chemistry today? What did you do in maths? That kind of thing. And, have you got any homework for it? Not, have you done your homework? Have you got any homework? Is it easy? Is it difficult? When are you going to do it? When's it due for? Like, conversational, not like interrogating. And having a positive attitude to the subject. Okay, so this is a real bugbear for STEM teachers, which is science, technology, engineering, maths. People are allowed to say they're not good at science or they're not good at maths. It is socially acceptable in this country to basically just write it off, say it's too hard, I don't understand it. I have had a head teacher in a previous school who used to do this all the time. He was a history graduate, and it drove me mad. It was just a constant undermining of, if you can do that, you are a geek. It's way beyond me. No one could possibly understand that. We don't do that for art, for English, for history, for French, okay? Not very often, okay? Do people go, I couldn't possibly do a music degree. Way beyond me. No, okay? So stop having language like that around your children, please, because it sinks in and they start to believe that they're not capable because you're saying it's okay. You're giving them a get out and saying, yeah, that's fine. No one gets it. It's really hard. It is hard. It is challenging. But that doesn't mean that only a tiny number of people could do it. Loads of more people could do it if we didn't have this belief that somehow we can't. And with that in mind, promoting mistakes as learning is the other positive thing you can do as a parent. Instead of taking that whole, oh my God, you got an E in your test, what the hell? I'm going to call the school. We're going to ground you. We're going to keep you in. We're going to get you a tutor. We're going to do all of this. We're going to fix this. Instead, just be a bit more like, take a deep breath and think, right, this went wrong. Why did it go wrong? Let's learn how to not make it wrong next time. What can we change? What can we do better? All of these things, instead of just suddenly blowing up and making it, because then they're going to want to hide their results. Then they want to not try, because if they don't try and they go, I didn't revise for it, that's why. Then they're giving themselves a get out so that next time, so basically they've got an excuse for why it went wrong. And that's not helpful either. Okay, so that was, in fact, a few other unhelpful things that parents can do. So we've talked about comparing teachers, comparing to siblings. That can be good or bad comparisons. Neither of those are helpful. Okay, so I've obviously seen the whole, your sister's gone to university and your sister was never any trouble at school and she got all grade A's and blah, blah, blah. And teachers do this too, by the way, between siblings. And it's not good. It's natural, but we need to stop doing it because everybody is an individual, even if they came from the same parents. It also doesn't help to do it the other way around. So what I got as a child was how much better and more academic I was than my sisters, and how much smarter and brighter, and I was the only one to go to university. That's a huge amount of pressure too. Nobody wants that either. Okay, sorry, Mum. But yeah, we don't want those comparisons. We're individual people with individual likes. So don't compare them. Don't be negative about the subject. We've already said that. Don't interrogate them. Just ask nicely about what they're doing. Don't be sort of like, have you done this? Have you done that? When is that due? And don't take too much control, because it really is not helpful for you to take over everything, for you to be the constant source of contact with the teachers. If your child is 17, they can ask a teacher a question. They need to learn how to do that. They need to learn how to send an email themselves. They need to learn how to find out what they're learning, and they need to learn what the criteria are and how they will be assessed. Don't focus on outcomes, i.e. constantly focusing on the grade, because there's enough of that already. You don't need to be doing that, which is why asking questions more about what your child is doing and not just how they're doing. So what are they learning about, not what grade they're getting. And again, focusing on the university aspect is putting a huge amount of stress on our young people. How about just asking them about their individual days? And focusing on things that don't matter. Teachers do this too, and schools do this. Which can be a source of friction, because actually, what does it matter what shoes someone's wearing or that kind of thing? That's a whole separate debate. But focusing on things that don't matter, like if your child prefers to work on a device or on paper, or I guess if they maybe just want to listen to music, or little things that don't matter. What matters is it working? Are they learning? Are they improving? Are they healthy and happy? That's about it, really. Okay, so I've talked way longer than I was meant to. This is quite a bit, there's a little, maybe no one will watch this at all, but I like to get it off my chest. There are difficult people in all walks of life. So students, parents, teachers. There's difficult people everywhere. There's people we don't get on with. Academic success is very emotional. It's not just a grade or a number. We all carry a lot of history and a lot of behavioural patterns that can lead to relationships going wrong really fast if we just hang on to those and don't think before we say something. So I like to try to remember the words of Brené Brown, who's just a brilliant lady. Whenever I'm getting defensive, and I do get argumentative sometimes myself, which is that we're here to get it right, not to be right. So take away from the point scoring and finger pointing. Start focusing on controllable actions, not on personalities, not on gut feelings, not on your emotions. Don't make assumptions about what's happening. If a teacher is genuinely struggling, so I've been in this position too earlier on in my career, and that could be due to personal reasons, or it could just be genuinely struggling with just adapting to a school, adapting to the teaching. At the beginning of your career, it's incredibly difficult. Then having a go at the teacher, zero help. Obviously that doesn't help you because you're thinking this teacher's not cutting it. They're not doing what I said was the reasonable things. In that case, yeah, you need to go past the teacher, just head of department. Don't go to the head teacher. Unless it's like literally a sort of safeguarding issue, you just go to the head of department, just go one level up and talk to them. Or if it's A level, there's often two teachers. So sometimes you can talk to the other teacher. But don't pit them against them. Say, I'm worried that this is not happening. And then they can investigate and they might know that there's stuff going on. Because if it's really the job of the school to be supporting that teacher. If they've got long-term illness, if they've got many issues where they're out of school a lot and absence is a real problem now, then it's the school's job to sort that out. Not the teacher who's dealing with the absences and because they're already trying to catch up all the time. And they're already feeling probably hugely guilty about not being able to do their job properly because of whatever's going on. So I'm just going to leave that there for you to remember that definitely you need to be thinking about, is it the school's issue or is it an individual teacher? Rarely, I think, is it actually an individual teacher. I genuinely believe that there are very few lazy students. So students usually have a reason that they're not doing work, and it's very rarely just because they're bone idle. And I think there's also very few lazy teachers as well. And there's hardly any lazy parents, because parents are super active in wanting to get things right, as you should be. So good luck with this year. If you've got any questions, drop it in the comments, or send me an email if you want to know more about getting some free support with your A-levels, particularly for chemistry anyway. And subscribe as well. I'm very bad at asking for that. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. The rest of it's all going to be chemistry, but you might get some help there as well.